Palworld was released back in February of this year, and even with the game being out for almost a year, many players still have questions about the game. And of course, the first place anyone would go searching for answers these days is by looking on Google. So today I wanted to go through some of the most frequently asked Palworld questions on Google and answer them the best that I can. What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Speedround, and today I'm going to be answering Palworld players' most frequently asked questions. But before we get into the video, just a friendly reminder that if you enjoy any of the music you hear during this video or just want to support the channel in general, it's all part of my DMCA free music label, Speedround Studios. This is a music label I created and run where all the songs on it are completely DMCA free, so go ahead and use any of these songs for your content creating needs. We currently have over 70 songs available with more added frequently, so if you're interested in checking that out, all the links will be in the description below. Finally, I want to mention that I made a poll for my community to vote on which video topic people would want me to talk about next. Now, technically you all voted for a complete guide on passive skills. However, since that video is going to take some time to finish, I decided to go with the second most voted on option for now. But if you want to take part in future polls like these, then make sure to subscribe and maybe leave a like while you're at it, because it really does help out the channel. Now, with all that out of the way, let's get back to the video. So before I start answering questions, I want to give a quick explanation of how I decided on the questions for this video. Pretty much as I implied at the beginning of this video, I went on Google and typed in the beginning of a question. Then out of all the results that popped up, I chose a few questions that I feel most people would have questions about. I also chose questions that I can answer fairly quickly since I didn't want to make this video an hour long. On top of this, I'll also be doing a speed round of answering questions that start with "can you," since these can mostly be answered with a yes or no. Finally, at the end, I'll be answering a question left by a viewer, mainly because it's much easier to explain visually rather than over text. But with that explanation all said and done, let's actually start answering some questions. Now, the first question I chose is, what are the best base locations? So there are plenty of good spots to build bases in Palworld, but instead of showing you every good spot you could build a base at, I'm going to show you some of my personal favorites. So the first base location we'll be looking at is where I have my main base of operations. I personally like this spot due to its massive flat area to build on, low level pals surrounding the area, and as a nice touch you get a great ocean view, which I personally enjoy very much. As for the second location, that's going to be my base I use for farming. Just like my previous base location, this is just a massive flat area to build a solid base at, along with having a low threat level with weak pals around the area. Now moving on to my next base location, and that's going to be my pal breeding base. I personally like this base location since, just like the other base locations, this is one of the more flat areas on Sakurajima Island, so building a base here is fairly easy. On top of that, there are two oil nodes right next to each other with enough room to build two extractors at one node. So it's a pretty solid base location once you're a bit further in the game. So on to my final base, and that's going to be my mining base where I get all my ores. I'll admit there probably are some better base locations than this since there are a decent amount of aggressive pals in the area, but I personally like this base location simply due to the two oil nodes along with being fairly close to my other base. But with my personal base locations out of the way, I'll quickly show off a few other locations I think would be great for bases. Now moving on to the next question, and that's going to be, what are the best pals in Palworld? So to be completely honest, this is a very broad question. However, I'll do my best to answer it in as many ways as possible. To start off, if you're looking for the best pals to have working at your base, luckily for you I already made a video discussing this topic, so if you haven't checked out that video already, I'd recommend checking it out after this one. Now if you're interested in finding out the best pal to use in combat, there's a few different answers for this. When it comes to the pal with the best attack, that's going to be a tie between Bellinor and Bellinor Libero with a max base attack of 1,409. As for the pal with the best defense, that's going to be Palladius with a max base defense stat of 1,289. Finally, when it comes to the pal with the most health, that's going to be Mammoris with a max health of 11,245 as an alpha pal. Now, even though these are definitively the best pals for all three stats, I wouldn't consider these the best pals in the game. Even though each of them have the highest stat in one category, some of their other stats usually aren't the greatest. Mammoris is a perfect example of this, with them having a really high health stat while lacking in both attack and defense. The same can be said about Bellinor and Bellinor Libero. Even though both of them have the best base attack stat, they aren't able to get some passive skills such as Legend due to them being limited to breeding with their own kind. So while these are technically the best pals in each category, after calculating the max base stat of a majority of the strongest pals in the game, I'm going to name some of the pals that I would personally consider to be the best all-around strongest pals. And the pals that I'd consider to be some of the best are Frostalion, Noct, Shadowbeak, Necromus, and Palladius. And while I'd consider these pals to be some of the best, there's actually one pal I personally believe to be the absolute without a doubt strongest pal in the game, and that's Nocklum. With Nocklem's partner ability being able to boost his attack and defense stats, he's easily one of the strongest pals in the game for both attack and defense. I mean, just look at these stats while their ability is activated and try to name another pal that comes close to these stats. But I think that's all I can really answer about this question, so let's move on to the next one. What is the best flying mount in Palworld? Now the answer to this question is pretty straightforward, and that's going to be Jet Dragon by a long shot. And to make one that's as fast as possible, you can use this passive skill combination to give them a 75% speed boost. But for those who might not have a Jet Dragon yet, here's a list of some of the other fastest pals in the game. Now moving on to a different type of question, and that's going to be how do you get ancient technology points? So there's actually a few different ways of getting ancient technology points. The first way is by defeating tower bosses. After defeating a tower boss for the first time, you'll receive 5 ancient technology points, with a total of 30 being able to be obtained after defeating all of them. The next way to obtain these points is by completing dungeons. After defeating the Alpha Pal boss at the end of any dungeon, you'll be rewarded with 2 chests that have a chance of dropping an ancient technical manual, which will give you 1 point after consuming. Now the final way to get ancient technology points is by searching chests at any of the sanctuary islands on the map. So with that question answered, the next question I have here is how do I breed / how do passive skills work? Now I clumped these questions together because I feel they're similar enough to where I can answer them together. But to give as simple of an answer as I can, any pal is able to breed by having a male, a female, and a breeding farm built somewhere at your base. To get the pals to start breeding, put both the male and female at your base and place them in the breeding farm. You can also use a monitoring stand to do this as well by clicking B on Xbox, circle on PlayStation, and finally C on keyboard and mouse. But from here, this is where passive skills are going to start coming into play. When a pal spawns into the game, they're able to have up to 4 random passive skills that are put onto them. That being said, there are some pals that can have exclusive passive skills which can only be naturally found on these pals. All of these passive skills can be bred down into other pals, but it isn't always a guarantee that offspring will have that passive skill, so it may take a few attempts to pass down that passive skill. It should also be noted that while a few pals are only able to breed with their own kind to make another version of that pal, most pals have a wide variety of breeding combinations you can choose from to get a certain pal. And if you're not sure which combinations of pals will give you the pal you need, Palworld's official website has a breeding calculator you can use to help you find a combination that works. But with that explanation of breeding and passive skills all said and done, that wraps up the longer questions, so let's move on to the speed round. Now these are the top 10 results that came up when I looked up can I blank in Palworld, and most of these can be answered with a quick yes or no, so without further ado, let's answer them. Question 1, can you catch bosses? If you mean alpha pals, then yes. If you mean tower bosses, then no, at least not anymore. Question 2, can pals evolve? No, they cannot. Question 3, can you breed alpha pals? The answer for this one is kinda. You are able to breed for alpha pals, however it's just a random chance that one of the eggs your pals lay will be an alpha egg. You can use alpha pals for breeding, but they won't change the odds of your pals producing an alpha egg. Question 4, can you move your base? Yes, but only after destroying your pal box first. Question 5, can you breed lucky? Once again, this is a bit of a yes and no. The only way to obtain lucky is by catching a lucky pal in the wild, which are fairly obvious to spot. That being said, once you do have a pal with lucky, you are able to breed that skill onto other pals. Question 6, can you reset stats? Yes, you can by consuming a memory wiping potion. You can either make this at an electric medicine workbench with these items, or you can farm Lavander since they have a chance of dropping these items along with many other useful items. Question 7, can you catch Bellinor / Bellinor Libro? You aren't able to catch this pal, but you can obtain their egg after defeating the raid boss version of either of these pals. Question 8, can you catch tower bosses? I already answered this in the first question, however I'll give a bit more context. There used to be a glitch where you were able to actually catch the tower bosses, however with updates fixing that glitch, you're no longer able to catch these tower bosses. Question number 9, can you breed humans? No. You sick fuck. And finally, question 10, can you trade pals? Unfortunately, you can't at this time, but I'm hoping that they add that feature sometime in the future. Now for the final question I'll be answering during this video. This question was asked by one of my viewers, which is how do I organize my pals and items? Since I mentioned before that this is much easier to explain visually, we're gonna hop into my private world fast to show you how I organize everything. Alright, so here we are at my base, and the first part of the question I'm going to tackle is how I organize my pals. So when it comes to the organization of my pals, to put it simply, I really don't have any sort of organization besides liking the pals that I'm going to use and not liking the pals that I'm not going to use. The only organization I really do for my pals is I sort by alpha first, and then I sort by the pal deck number. And then the very last thing I do is that any pals I fully upgraded, I put a little star by their name just so I know that they're 100% maxed out in case I'm not wearing ability glasses. But with the organization of my pals out of the way, let me show off how I actually organize the rest of my items. So starting with food crates from left to right, we have this first one here, and that's going to have my eggs and all of my milk. As you can see, some other items will end up eventually going into these because I do have some farms around my base, but this is how I generally organize things. For this next food bin here, we have all my meat, my flour, and some mushrooms. For the middle food bin, that's where I keep all my tomatoes and lettuce. In the second to last bin, that's where I keep all my berries. And in my final food bin, that's where I keep all my cooked foods. Moving on to my metals and ores, I keep those next to my furnaces. In this first chest is where I keep all charcoal and metal ingots. And then the chest right next to it keeps all raw ore. Now moving on to this building here, this is where I keep all of my actual supplies. So in this room right here, this is where I keep all of my supplies, and I have them all organized in every single one of these chests. I know this seems like a lot of chests to organize everything in, but with how long I've been playing the game, trust me, it really comes in handy to have everything organized neatly. But without further ado, let me show you how I organize everything. So starting with the chest closest to the door, we have my chest that I keep all my fiber and stone in. The next one contains all my wood. The third one keeps a bunch of miscellaneous materials. The next one has element organs and gunpowder. After that, we have palladium fragments and sulfur. Plus, this is where I keep quartz and oil since I usually don't have a lot of these materials. The next chest is where I keep my coal. The one after that keeps all my lotuses, ancient civilization parts, and all my high value items. The next chest is where I keep all my medicine and potions. Plus, since I really don't have a good spot to keep them, that's where I keep all my seeds for farming as well. The chest after that is where I start to keep all my skill fruits, and I usually like to organize them from weakest to strongest. But the chest after that has the rest of my skill fruits. And then the chest on the very end is where I keep all my pal spheres. So moving on to the chest on this side, and this is where I keep all my weapons and ammunition. Starting with this chest on the very end, this is where I keep my blueprints for all my hats. In the chest in the corner, this is where I keep all my useless blueprints I get for clothing. And the one next to it has all my useless blueprints for weapons. The next chest is where I keep all my accessories. 2 chests down is where I'm going to keep all my armor. The chest after that has all my weapons and grenades. The next chest is my first ammunition chest. And then the one after that is my second one. And then the chest on the very end is where I keep all my hats from beating hard mode tower bosses. And then this chest on the very end of my assembly line has all my gold and purple blueprints. So the last places I keep anything are going to be in my room here, which once again I think is a very nice looking room. But in this wardrobe, this is where I keep all my hats. In this bookshelf, this is where I keep all my scrolls. In this little bookshelf here, this is where I keep all of my pal souls. In this shelf where this TV's on, this is where I keep all my other miscellaneous items. And last but not least, on this tiny little nightstand here, this is where I keep all of my money. And for those who are curious what the max amount of gold you can have in a stack is, it's 99,999,999. Did I get all those nines? But that's going to be how I organize everything at my base. If you guys want to see a full base tour and everything, let me know in the comments below. But other than that, I'm going to let the other me take over from here. But those are going to be all the questions I'll be answering in this video, so let me know what you think down below. Let me know if I answered any questions you might have had, and let me know if you'd like to see another video like this. But finally, once again, if you enjoyed any of the music you heard during this video or just want to support the channel in general, it's all part of my DMCA free music label, which you can check out on the links down below. But that's all I have to say for now, so thank you all so much for watching the video. I very much appreciate it, and I'll catch all y'all in the next one. Take it easy, everybody.